Good evening and welcome to Africa News Network First Fast Live. My name is Cindy Mabi. A leaked Facebook document reportedly suggests the social networking site is exploiting the moods of vulnerable youth to benefit advertisers. According to a document reportedly written by Facebook executives, the social network gathers information on youths who need a confidence boost to facilitate predatory advertising practices. Facebook allegedly monitors posts, comments and interactions on the site to work out when teenagers feel overwhelmed, defeated, stressed, anxious or nervous. Facebook has since issued an apology and promised to conduct an investigation into the matter. The revelation raises concerns about the dangers of young people falling prey to advertisers who exploit their vulnerability. The leaked documents are reportedly written by two Facebook executives. Facebook is gathering information on youths who need a confidence boost, and this information could be used by advertisers to target more vulnerable users. And this is what Facebook users say about the allegations.
They sell all your status updates and your likes and all that to advertising companies that come back and put advertisements and quizzes on your Facebook page, which kind of influences your viewpoint on the world as in general.
Whatever I post on my wall should be private because it is mine and it's meant for my friends, not for them to go and put it out there for everyone else that isn't supposed to know it. Because you have settings where you put it private, but then people still access it, even if it's private. So I think there should be a law that's preventing all of this from happening.
We perhaps maybe need to look at the law of social media and maybe just implement laws that regulate on how your information is shared with third parties and so on. And also, secondly, we need to also educate our people, especially young people, not to post a lot on social media. For instance, not to put their whole life on social media.
Meanwhile, Facebook says the data used in the research was aggregated and presented consistent with applicable privacy and legal protections, including the removal of any personally identifiable information. And joining us on the line, Arthur Goldstuck, Editor-in-Chief at The Gadget. He's also the Managing Director of the Worldwide Works, an ICT research firm. Thank you so much, Arthur, for your time. I mean, how prevalent is this practice and potential danger to vulnerable users? How do we curb that? All right, I believe we're trying to get Arthur on the line. Ferlie Westhuizen is a social media expert. Ferlie, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us. How widespread is this practice? Do we know? Can we quantify it?
I think that it's exactly how Facebook is run, and I think that's the reality we all need to accept. We all sign up for Facebook thinking that it's a free site, and in a way it is. We don't pay to go onto the application. But the thing is that when you actually look at the user agreement that you are agreeing to when you sign up, you're actually agreeing to have all of your information shared with advertising agencies and with advertising companies. And that is what you sign up for. So to these kind of studies that they do and these aggregated studies looking at people's emotions have been done since the beginning of Facebook. This isn't, unfortunately, anything new.
So you're saying that it's the user's responsibility to read the fine print and protect themselves and be vigilant on which sites they go to?
That's exactly it, and I think that people will realize, and I think if you listen to the people that called in, if you put your information on Facebook, then they'll come up with all sorts of adverts that will directly link with the kind of things that you've been posting. For example, if you just got engaged, suddenly there'll be a whole lot of advertisements for wedding venues or for wedding dresses, etc. That's how Facebook makes their money. And so they have to look at these. They have to look at these things, and they do these studies. They obviously, we have to take them at their word that they do it in terms of the applicable laws, and that they're not looking at your personal information and linking it to your actual persona. But to think that they wouldn't be using this information in this way, unfortunately, is slightly naive.
But then the young people primarily who use the sites, are they cyber ready, mature? Are they able to decipher and discern which information is harmful or not?
Well, that's exactly the problem. And that's why there is actually an age restriction of 14 on Facebook, which I'm sure a lot of people actually don't know. You're not supposed to sign up before the age of 14. And unfortunately, a 14-year-old's emotions, even if they're very tech savvy, are still a 14-year-old's emotions. And so they maybe are not mature enough to deal with some of the things that they may see. It just means that parents have to get involved, schools have to get involved, and people have to be educated about what they're exposing their children to when they go onto social media sites. And nobody is forced to go on a social media site. You sign up because you want to be on it. Everybody has a choice to go off Facebook if they want to.
Please stay on the line. We have Arthur Goldstuck, Editor-in-Chief at The Gadget. He's also the Managing Director of Worldwide Works, an ICT research firm. Arthur, thanks so much. Good evening to you. Now that we know that obviously there's a compilation of research and data primarily to facilitate more revenue for advertisers, I guess the best thing would be to inform and educate young people on the dangers of social media. Do you think that South Africa has adequate laws to protect any form of abuse on social networks?
I don't think we have adequate laws. The real problem is that all these social networks are ultimately businesses. So their main priority is to generate revenue, whereas for the users, their main priority is to communicate with each other and more to find information. So obviously the social networks like Facebook take advantage of those needs and turn that into revenue. But with that comes massive responsibility to protect their community. And we're not seeing enough of that happening yet. And it's very difficult for the law to protect people in that kind of environment where they've signed on, where they've agreed to terms and conditions, and where they're suddenly exposed to this kind of content. But there are ways for legislators to act. So, for example, in some countries, certain kinds of content is illegal, but also for many companies producing content, that content may not be shared for copyright reasons. And the likes of Facebook and YouTube are very quick to protect the copyright owners from their content being shared. So they need to be more adept at protecting their users as well from being exposed to offensive content, on one hand. But on the other hand, governments or legislators have to become more tech savvy. They have to start understanding that there are things they can do. There are restrictions that they can place on what kind of content Facebook can allow to be viewed in a particular country. And if more legislators come to the fore with restrictions against exposing minors, for example, to violent content, then it should force the likes of Facebook to move far more aggressively on that. But the responsibility ultimately does lie with the social networks themselves, with Facebook, YouTube, and the like.
Yeah, but what kind of dangers does this pose, especially for somebody who's not mature enough to make informed decisions, especially the messaging being subliminal, not really directive or suggestive for that matter? What kind of examples can you cite in terms of how young people and vulnerable people are used on these sites?
In the book that I wrote with Nikki Bush called Tech Savvy Parenting, we actually go back to the beginnings of television to show how harmful content, or rather undesirable content, you might call it, can have a very negative effect on young people. And it's no different to watching violence or unacceptable content on TV. It has the same impact. And social media doesn't suddenly reinvent content from that point of view. It doesn't reinvent the dangers either. The dangers are the same as the ones that have always faced us, and the harm is the same as the harm that's always been around. The key is to apply the same principles as you do to TV to social media.
All right, stay on the line, please. We have Verlie Oosthuizen, a social media expert. Verlie, just again, it's one thing to say parents need to be more vigilant as to what their children are seeing on social media, but also government has a role to play primarily when it comes to the type of contracts or businesses that are allowed to operate in the country. Do you think that in terms of the ICT and the postal services, etc., are doing enough?
Well, I just think that if you start to try and legislate in terms of social media, it becomes quite a tricky area. And I say the same thing over and over. I'm not a huge fan of very strict legislation when it comes to media, because then the government is overseeing what people are saying and what people are thinking, and that that harkens back to very, very dark times. However, I do think that there has to be some kind of self-regulation with businesses. And that means that businesses have to start taking some kind of responsibility. I don't think that at the moment the government has the resources or the the capacity to be dealing with a whole lot of cyber security issues. Although we do have a new cybercrimes bill and cybercrimes act that's coming out. So we are moving in that direction, but I just think that if we start to say that we need to shut down social media, it becomes tricky. Obviously, with children, it is different. If it's somebody who's under 18, then I'm a lot more keen on some kind of restrictions. And if it means that the government said that people under 18 aren't allowed to use Facebook, then I wouldn't really have a problem with that. But when people are saying that we need to shut down social media platforms, then to me that becomes a little bit more insidious.
Yeah, but you don't think that Facebook or the other social networks need to take more precaution, albeit that they're doing it for research purposes and the user inadvertently or unwittingly is now, submitting to a survey to collate all of this data, that the social network sites needs to be more responsible?
Yes, I definitely think that they need to make it very, very clear. And I think, unfortunately, when people are signing up for Facebook, they often don't know what they're signing up for when they don't read the fine print. And so there may be more of a responsibility on these social networks to make it very clear and to educate the public about what their information is actually going to be used for. And they don't need a law degree to understand what that fine print says.
Arthur, your view just on the leaked documents, that it deliberately targets vulnerable young people who on their posts unwittingly, share their emotions of defeat and being not being cool, all the things that matter to young people and the damage that it can potentially cause?
We have to be careful of the source of that story, which is the Daily Mail, which is one of the newspapers that are famed for clickbait. In other words, distorting the news to try and get more people to click on it, which in a way is exactly what Facebook is trying to do. So it's almost setting a thief to catch a thief. But given the facts of the matter, if they are as stated, then it's an example of social networks overreaching themselves and in fact violating the trust that people have in them. And Facebook needs to take a very firm stance on this, and they need to come out publicly. As is just been said, they need to be very open and clear about how they're protecting the users, what they are doing to protect them. And one of the things that they haven't done enough of is to make their privacy settings obvious enough, available enough, and clear enough. And that applies to security settings as well.
Well, there's credence to the story because Facebook did issue a formal apology, so they wouldn't do so if they didn't feel, that they have a level of liability in how users may be targeted and preyed on by advertisers.
I think the apology we also have to see in the context of how it was reported. But having apologized, clearly they understand that they've overstepped the mark. We just don't know how far they really have overstepped it because it hasn't been reported more broadly. So we're waiting to see more analysis of that and more response from Facebook about what happened. Then it'll be easier to respond specifically to that allegation. But it's not very different to what's already being done to target people based on their behavior, based on the kind of content that they already view and the kind of content they post. If you consider Google, for example, with Gmail, they have algorithms that look for specific wording in your emails. Although no human being is reading your emails, their systems can read your emails. And if they see you mentioning, let's say my surname, for example, being mentioned quite often in my email, suddenly I start seeing advertising for buying gold, just as an example, which is quite an absurd example, but I've actually seen that in the past before they tightened up those algorithms. So, in fact, our privacy is already being raided in a way in order to generate more targeted advertising.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Arthur Goldstuck, Editor-in-Chief for The Gadget. He's also the Managing Director of Worldwide Works, an ICT research firm. Veli Westhuizen is a social media expert joining us on the line. And, of course, we go now to other stories.